They say every man gets what he pays for. But that day in Dry Creek, a man got his fate for free. The sun hung low and mean over the courthouse square, bleaching the world into shades of rust and dust. Wind stirred the dry weeds along the hitching posts. Horses flicked their tails against the flies. A crowd had gathered, ranch hands, drifters, and housewives with sharp eyes, all come to see a spectacle the judge called charity. On the crude wooden steps of the courthouse, Judge Amos Ketteridge stood sweating through his vest, his voice booming. "Pick you a wife for free, boys? Hard times, hard women. Let's make some homes out of leftovers." Laughter tore through the air. Someone spat into the dirt. Someone else whistled. And standing just beside the platform was her, Lydia Mae Stoltzfus. She wasn't the kind of woman men noticed. 30, maybe, with a soft, round frame that her gray Amish dress didn't flatter, only confined. Her cheeks were pink with shame. She held her hands folded in front of her, shoulders trembling slightly, though her chin refused to bow. A kerchief hid her hair, but wisps of blonde framed her face like tired sunlight. They whispered she was too big, too plain, too proud for her looks. But in her stillness, there was something resolute. Across the crowd, leaning against a post in a brown duster and a week's worth of dust on his boots, Eli Harlan watched quietly. 35, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by loss. He'd buried a wife and child once, and with them, his laughter. Now he kept to his ranch and to silence where the world couldn't reach him. But that day, something about the scene pulled him in. The judge barked out names, pairing desperate men with equally desperate women, contracts signed like livestock trade. When the last of the girls were chosen, Lydia remained. Alone, the crowd murmured. A child pointed and giggled. The judge sighed dramatically. "Well, seems no one's got an appetite today." He leaned forward, sneering. "Tell you what, this one here can cook, clean, plow a field if the mule won't. Any takers? Pick you a wife for free." The laughter was uglier now. A coin clinked at Lydia's feet. Someone shouted, "She'll eat you out of house and home." Lydia's throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed forward, glassy but dry. She'd learned long ago that tears gave folks something to feel better about. The judge scanned the crowd until his gaze landed on Eli. "You there, Harlan. You got that big ranch and no woman to keep it warm. You'll take her, won't you?" Eli didn't answer. The men chuckled, nudging one another. "She'll keep you well fed, that's for sure." For a moment, no sound but the wind whispering through the flags above. Then Eli straightened, his eyes meeting Lydia's. There was no pity in his look, just recognition. The kind a wounded soul gives another. He stepped forward, voice low but firm. "I'll take the Amish girl," the laughter faltered. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You serious, Harlan?" Eli nodded once. "Paperwork ready?" A hush rolled through the square like a cold draft. When it was done, Lydia didn't thank him. She didn't smile. She just stood there, her eyes full of questions she didn't dare ask. They left town in silence, the crowd still staring after them as their wagon creaked down the dry road. The prairie stretched wide and endless, painted in golden shadow beneath the bleeding sun. Lydia clutched her shawl, her fingers trembling. The smell of hay and horses mixed with the faint sweetness of her soap, lavender, barely there. Finally, she said softly, "You don't have to keep me." "I know what this was." Eli's hand stayed steady on the reins. "Didn't take you to throw you away." She turned her face toward the horizon. "You could have walked away." "I've done enough walking," he said, eyes never leaving the trail. By the time they reached the ranch, twilight had fallen like a blue curtain. The air was cool and clean after the long day's heat. A dog barked once, slow and tired. The house stood plain but sturdy, surrounded by open silence. Lydia hesitated at the porch. "I can sleep in the barn," she offered. Eli looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself." He lit a lantern in the kitchen, the flame flickering over worn wooden walls. In the barn, Lydia spread her small bundle on the hay, hands shaking slightly as she prayed. Through the thin walls, she could hear the lonely creak of the windmill and the faint sound of a man moving about his house alone. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing in that square, humiliated but unbroken. He heard again the laughter of men who'd never known real work or hunger. He turned over on his cot, sighing. In the quiet, through the storm's approach, he thought he heard her crying softly. Days passed in near silence. She cooked, cleaned, and tended the hens without being asked. She moved slowly, but there was a calm diligence to her, every act deliberate, like prayer. Eli watched her sometimes from a distance. She never lingered idle. She never complained. Word spread through town quick as wildfire. Eli Harlan took the fat Amish girl for free. At the general store, Lydia felt the stares like arrows. Clara Dunn, the storekeeper's wife, whispered loud enough for her to hear. "She won't last the winter. Big ones never do." Lydia said nothing, just set her basket down and counted the coins carefully. Outside, Eli was loading the wagon. He'd overheard it all, though he said nothing. But that night, before dawn, Lydia found a neat stack of firewood piled by her barn door, dry and perfect for the stove. She stared at it for a long time, her breath catching. No words, no note, just a quiet kindness. Later that morning, when Eli came in for breakfast, he found a warm loaf of bread on his table with a small piece of folded paper beside it. In her plain handwriting, it read, "For your kindness. I will not waste it." He read it under the weak lamplight, the corners of his mouth twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile, but close. The summer heat broke a few nights later with a storm. The horizon turned purple-black, thunder rolling across the plains like drums of war. The horses snorted nervously in their stalls. Eli went out to tie down the shutters. The rain came sudden and fierce, hammering the earth. Lightning split the sky and struck a tree near the barn. The crack of it shook the ground. Eli turned just in time to see fire licking up the trunk, spreading toward the dry haystack. "Lydia!" he shouted. She appeared in the doorway, clutching a lantern. "Eli, get out!" The next flash blinded them both. A branch snapped, crashing toward her. She screamed. Eli ran, boots sinking in the mud, and threw himself through the rain, caught her just as the timbers came down. Together they tumbled into the wet grass, the thunder drowning their breaths. For a moment, the world was all fire and rain, the scent of smoke and her hair and fear. She lay against him, shaking. He held her tighter than he'd held anything in years. The barn burned behind them, orange light flickering in their eyes. The rain hissed and spat, a storm fighting fire, heaven and hell clashing just beyond reach. Eli looked down at her, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide and luminous. She stared back at him, not in gratitude, not in fear, but with something wordless and deep. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He didn't need them. The storm raged on around them, but somewhere inside its roar, something quiet was born, something neither of them could yet name. When morning came, the world smelled new. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, left the prairie glittering with dew. Eli sat near the hearth, boots drying by the fire, the faint crackle of wet wood filling the silence. Lydia stirred beneath a wool blanket draped over her shoulders, her hair unbound, her breath soft and uneven. He turned when she woke, his voice low. "You could have been killed." She looked into the firelight, her words trembling. "Maybe I was already." That answer stayed with him long after she left the room. The way she said it, not bitter, not broken, just tired of being seen as something less than alive. Outside, sunlight slid through the window, warming the dust in the air like flecks of gold. The storm had taken the barn, but it had left behind something neither could name, a quiet awareness, a shared silence that no longer felt empty. Days stretched on. Summer ripened into late August, the fields humming with locusts. Life at the ranch settled into rhythm. Eli mended fences while Lydia worked in the garden, her skirts brushing over the dry earth. Sometimes she hummed soft Amish hymns from her childhood, and though he didn't know the words, he found himself pausing just to listen. One evening, he walked into the kitchen to find her slipping scraps of beef stew to his old hound under the table. The dog's tail wagged in guilty delight. "You ain't gotta hide kindness," he said, a faint grin tugging at his mouth. She froze, cheeks pink. "I was only—" He looked hungry. "Man or dog, hunger's nothing to be ashamed of," Eli said, leaning against the doorway. Her eyes darted toward him. "I've been told kindness is wasted on me." He tilted his head. "Then maybe folks been wrong a long while." She smiled then, small and shy, and for the first time, he saw something beyond her weight or weariness, something bright, buried deep. That night, he sat outside under the stars longer than usual, listening to the crickets, thinking how a woman's voice could heal parts of a man he thought were gone forever. Weeks later, they went into town for supplies. The air was heavy with gossip before they even reached the store. Lydia could feel it, eyes crawling across her skin, whispers curling behind her. "There she is," someone muttered. "Harlan's free wife." Outside the saloon, a drunk man named Silas Boone leaned against a post and grinned. "Hey, Harlan, how's the free meal treating you?" Eli ignored him, leading Lydia toward the store. Silas stepped forward, grabbing her arm. "Don't be shy now. Let's see what a free woman feels like." The world went still. Eli turned slow. His voice came low, calm as a knife before the strike. "Let her go," Silas laughed. "Or what? You'll shoot me for touching what nobody else wanted?" Eli's jaw clenched. "Don't make me say it twice." The laughter barely left Silas's lips before Eli's fist found his jaw. The man crumpled into the dust, blood and pride spilling together. The street fell silent. The crowd, which moments before had mocked, now only watched, the kind of silence that follows when cruelty finally meets its reckoning. Eli helped Lydia to her feet. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, just brushed the dirt from her sleeve. Then he said quietly, "Let's go home." On the ride back, Lydia's voice broke through the quiet. "You shouldn't have done that. Folks'll turn on you now." He shrugged. "You're my wife." The word startled her. Wife. Not free, not charity, just wife. He added, "Free or not, it don't change that." That night, she tended the scrape on his knuckle, her hand steady though her heart wasn't. Their fingers brushed. The space between them thickened with something fragile and alive. "You don't owe me kindness," she whispered. "Maybe kindness ain't something owed," he said, his voice soft. "Maybe it's something shared." She couldn't look at him long after that. But when she rose early next morning, she baked a pie, the first since her family's farm had burned years ago. When he took a bite, he smiled faintly. "It's good. It's burnt," she said, embarrassed. "Still good." And for the first time, they laughed together. Quiet, unguarded laughter that filled the kitchen like sunlight. The days rolled forward, the way prairie days do, simple, endless, almost holy in their stillness. But peace doesn't last long on the frontier. One late evening, as crimson light poured across the horizon, smoke began curling from the rebuilt barn. A lantern had tipped, catching straw. "Lydia!" Eli shouted, sprinting toward the flames. She was already there, beating at the fire with a wet blanket. The horse inside neighed in panic. "Get back!" Eli yelled. "I won't leave him!" she cried. The fire snapped between them, gold and black. He plunged inside anyway, the roof cracked, smoke choking the air. He found the horse tangled in the stall ropes, coughing hard. His hands burned as he cut the ties, guiding the animal out. A beam fell, pinning his shoulder. Lydia screamed and rushed in, pulling with all her might until it gave way. They stumbled out together, collapsing in the dirt, coughing smoke, the night alive with fire and the smell of ash. When the last flame died, Eli sat there, staring at her, face streaked with soot, hair wild, breath ragged. He said it quietly, almost in disbelief. "You saved me." Lydia looked at him, eyes full of tears and smoke and something stronger than both. "You did that first." For a long while, they just sat there, the stars peeking through the smoke above, the prairie wind soft around them. By dawn, the world was gray again. Together they began rebuilding, side by side, their shadows long against the rising sun. No vows were spoken, No love declared, just quiet work, steady and sure. Weeks later, people in town noticed the change. The gossip faded. They said the big woman from the auction smiled now, and the rancher who never spoke much had started whistling again. Sometimes, in the evenings, Eli would read by lamplight while Lydia mended shirts at the table. The silence between them no longer hurt. It hummed with something alive, trust perhaps, or peace. And when the wind brushed through the open windows, it carried the soft scent of baked bread, the sound of a woman humming hymns, and the whisper of a life remade from scraps. Because sometimes love doesn't come roaring in like thunder. It comes slow, like sunrise over dry land, warming what the world left cold. And if you ever feel the world laughing at you, remember Lydia May, the woman no man wanted, the one a man took for free and found himself richer than he'd ever been.